Now then guys, hope you're keeping well. I've got a very interesting bit of kit in my hands right here. Well, this is just the empty case for it as it's installed on the scope already, but it's a HyperStar V4 for the Edge HD 11. A little bit of a while back now, not too long. I sold my RASA 11 V2 as part of a kind of an adjustment of the gear that I have in my observatory. It was the piece of kit that I felt the worst about having sat there sometimes because it's such a valuable piece of equipment. It really deserved to just be permanently mounted and in use. But I think it's fair to say equally, it was the single piece of gear in the observatory that gave me the most headaches out of everything. It was a truly phenomenally good scope when tuned and working properly, but getting there, it was a lot of work, to be honest. And it never truly was grab and go. If ever I wanted to take something else off my mount and remount the RASA, it would inevitably involve a little period of readjustments and messing around and things like that, and it just wasn't what I was looking for. So that was what went. Anyway, after selling that, I thought, right, I'm going to try and contend as I am and go without having a really fast telescope for a while, and as you can tell, that didn't last. I found this popped up for sale, used, over here in the UK, and I thought, go on then, treat yourself. So I reinvested a bit of that cash that the RASA 11 sale generated into buying this for myself, and I'm happy to say I'm glad that I did, because this has lived up way beyond my expectations. I'll touch upon this later in the video, I'm sure, but I really thought that a bolt-on solution would always be kind of playing second fiddle to a built from the ground up solution such as a RASA, but I'm really happy to say that the guys over at StarXTerminator, it's not just by accident that they've been making these things as long as they have. They're darn good at it. It's a really impressive piece of kit. It's way better than I thought it would be, to be honest, and I had decently high expectations, but I didn't go in completely blind. A good friend of mine, Bill Blanchon, I use a lot of his processing tools and things like that, and you may have seen him pop up on his own channel. He's got a lot of great videos on there. Go ahead and check him out if you haven't already. It's another Astro channel. But I was contacting my friend Bill anyway and asking about the HyperStar, because I know that he's been through the same sort of tribulations as me. He's owned a RASA 8 and he really liked that, as did I. But he owned a RASA 11 for a period too, and he got rid of it, basically, in favour of his HyperStar. And I found that really interesting, because if someone as discerning as Bill thought that the HyperStar was good enough, then there clearly had to be something behind it. So I asked him, I said, you know, what do you reckon to these things, Bill? And he says, I really like it. I think I like it more than my RASA. So my ears pricked up. I was paying attention at that point. Anyway, very kindly sent over some data for me to evaluate. So this is some NGC 7822 data, both in dual narrowband and just in, you know, broadband light from his location. And it got me very interested, to be honest, because if we just look at this now in a one-to-one view, you can see the star quality across the entire field of view. It's very good, really. It's very good. Now, this is on an APS-C size sensor, which I think is about the upper limit for the HyperStar 11 V4. I don't quite think it will cover full frame, if I'm not mistaken. But as I wanted to use it with an APS-C size sensor anyway, that little drawback over the RASA, which could cover full frame, didn't really matter to me. But as you can see, this performance, both on and off axis, hopefully this is coming across for you, that Bill was pulling out of his telescope, really impressed me. So I pulled the trigger. Like I say, I bought this, installed it, and that's what this video is going to be all about. I realize that's a very wordy introduction, but I had a lot to say. And I hope you're going to enjoy the rest of this one. Alright guys, so we're here at the business end of my Edge HD 11. I've gone ahead and found a file online and printed myself a cable manager, just like I used to have for my RASA 11. And you can see you can put this wherever you need it, route your cables around the side, and avoid the kind of cable diffraction spikes that you would sometimes find with front mounted camera systems like this, which is kind of ugly at times. I'm going to go ahead. This is currently still just in F10 Schmidt-Cassegrain mode right now, so you can see the secondary mirror is in place. Apologies about the lighting conditions in here. But with the HyperStar itself right there in hand, we have on the bottom side of it if I just unscrew this last few threads, a small holder right here with an inset. You can hopefully see that notch missing. Your secondary mirror is also notched on your HHD. So you can take this out and stow it away safely in there. So first things first, my scope's just about flat, so I am worried that when I take this off, the mirror could try to tip out. So once I've undone this fully, hopefully you can see, I'm just keeping a little bit of forward pressure on my mirror. So this ring, I'm going to need this ring again in a moment. Just put it somewhere accessible. And now it's time to take out the secondary mirror, and there it is. There's the notch. Hopefully this will focus. You can see there's a little grub screw right there. Locate that into the storage pin, careful as we can, and that's now ready to be locked down safe. So screw that on, and that's stored, you know what I mean? Now I've got a safe secondary mirror, nothing to worry about. Apologies if it looks precarious up there, it's safer than it looks on camera, I promise. Hopefully they're not famous last words, but here we are now with the HyperStar ready to put on the end. All I need to do now is stick an M48 adapted camera. Thinking of probably going with a 2600 or something like that. So I'll offer this up to the threads, back turn a small amount with some forwards pressure until I can, oh, there we go. I think we've just, no, the fine threads, there we go. I think we're getting there. The very fine threads, so you don't want to cross thread. You can see hopefully this is now attached, but it's moving with truly minimal pressure. So we know we haven't cross threaded anything. I'm going to go ahead and wind this down. All right, so we're in place. I'm not going to go, so I'm stopping at a very small tighten and stopping at that. Don't ever over tighten these things, because the last thing you want is this to weld together as soon as it gets freezing cold, you know what I mean? And then you end up pretty much rotating your secondary mirror housing, or maybe even your entire corrector plate needing to be removed to get that thing off. That would be a nightmare. Doesn't need to be cranked down on, do you know what I mean? Just needs to be snug. Well guys, as you can see, the camera is now in place in front of the Edge HD, and you can notice probably it's misrotated. This was one of the things I really kind of hated about the RASA experience. Getting your camera angle just right meant undoing a huge baffle lock nut, like the one that we just did on the secondary mirror right there for rotation, but a much bigger one. Undoing that, adjusting your rotation, locking back down, as well as trying to calculate in just how much the whole imaging rig was going to continue to rotate as you tighten things down. It was a nightmare setting the rotation, but one of the really strong things about HyperStar, it's got a rotator built in. So these three bolts right here, if I just very slightly undo those ones, I can set my rotation just like this, no problems whatsoever. So that looks pretty close. We'll adjust it more finely from there, but just wind back down on those, finger tight, everything's locked, and now my camera is at about 0 or 90 degrees. I can't really remember which way the sensor's installed in that thing, but yeah, that's a +1 for HyperStar. I really like that about it, being able to set your rotation very, very easily. Now you'll also note the next part that's going to come up for me with this is a set of 3 push-pull screws. So we've got the pull screws, the small ones right there, and then the push screws, the ones that stick up. I've reset this thing down into its home position, if you like. So it's basically just wound all the way down until it's metal on metal contact practically. So the only options that I've got at this point is just a push movement. I'm going to try and set things from there, as I think that's a good starting point, and we'll see how we go. It's going to be a major learning experience, I think, for me, and hopefully it's not too much of a troublesome one.
Now then guys, so everything's up and running now. It's all just about ready to go. All I need to do is get things collimated and then check the flatness of my sensor. You can see that with a very tight crop, so 640 by 480 blown up to 300% on my screen right here. This is with the star on axis in the center of field. short duration exposure loop kind of thing, so a video feed, and ran inside of focus by I think about 3,000 steps or so. It is out of collimation rather, with it in its indexed to home position, so everything tightened up metal to metal. So there is a little bit of collimation work to be done, but it's not much. And interestingly enough, when it's in focus, even with it at this exact state of collimation, nothing touched yet, when it's in focus, this is what the star shapes look like. So it's pretty good already, you know what I mean? It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And even in the corners, so top left, bottom left, bottom right, top right, star shapes are already really quite good, even with it just close to collimation. I am going to go ahead and collimate this perfectly if I can, and then we'll see what improves from there. But I just thought that was interesting to note, because it's one of the things I'd initially worried about with the HyperStar. I thought that chasing perfect collimation was going to be a huge headache in order to, you know, and really needed to get good stars, but it doesn't really seem like that's massively the case. So anyway, enough waffling. Going to go ahead and try and get this thing collimated, and we'll check back in after that. Well, and guys, that was very undramatic indeed. I'm no stranger to collimation, don't get me wrong, but that was just pretty easy, to be honest, fairly intuitive as to what's going on. I just tried a push movement, as that's the only movement that I left myself on the worst affected side, if you like, the largest gap, and a push started to lessen that gap and square things up, and just a couple of tiny nudges from there, really making sure that things are still, you know, as near as darn it perfectly on axis, and we are, well, we're collimated. Now it's done. I've checked it both sides of focus, and I'm happy. I'm as happy as Larry, actually. I'm really impressed, as you can see as we close in now, just on focus. So we're going counterclockwise on the Schmidt-Cassegrain focuser right there. That's really important, by the way, before you do any collimation tasks. You can see that last ring evenly disappearing. Hopefully you can make that out on the screen. It's really important before you do any collimation tasks anyway, that you always have the mirror pushed against the threads by moving counterclockwise on those Schmidt-Cassegrain threads. And that's exactly what I've done here. And as you can see, maybe one more push and we'll be probably just through perfect focus actually there. So we'll have to go positive slightly. But yeah, if you do that, you'll always be able to repeat and get into the same collimation position time after time. And that's obviously paramount importance. If you didn't know that and you start trying to collimate with a clockwise movement last applied to your focuser, then you might think you've got it, and then the first time that you make a counterclockwise movement and push against gravity, you'd throw yourself out. So just always make sure you've got that consistency there. And yeah, this is it. It's appears to be collimated. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come out of SharpCap Live, and let's check this together on here. So equipment, I'm going to go ahead and connect back up this camera. Why not kick off the cooling as well? And let's try, I don't know, a 5-second, not a loop, exposure, and see how far off we are. This gives a good indication now of what's what. So once this downloads, we can take a little look around the frame. So center frame, it's good to me. We're at 111% zoom right here as well, so more than 1:1. Far left, looks good. Top left, really good. Bottom left, incredibly slight elongation. Obviously this is now tilt that we're dealing with. As we know, the collimation's perfect. Same deal really. Bottom right, it's so incredibly small, I'm not even going to bother, to be honest. And top right, kind of the same deal. So in one, you know what I mean, there's the aberration inspector view. In 5 minutes and it's done. Any fears that I initially had have very quickly, just been blinding with this light, sorry, very quickly melted away with this now, and I'm just going to get to enjoying it. And by the way, it looks like the vignette pattern that we're seeing is incredibly even, which is a good sign. And if we just check the values, so mean values in the bottom left of 1477, also 1500, 1470, 80, 1470, 80. Yeah, it looks like the illumination is incredibly even too. I'll just take one more test frame and we'll make double sure that there's not a passing cloud or something acting in my favor. But yeah, overall, first impressions of the HyperStar are, I'm a believer. Yeah, I'm very happy overall with that. Looks to be squared. Now I guess the last test is, how well does the rotation tool re-index itself? So let's plate solve this and see how far off square I was. So 178.49, so I need to add, I think, a little bit of rotation to this. I'll get that figured out in a moment, and then we'll see if collimation has held and if those star shapes are still good, but I've no reason to believe it won't be. It seems to be mechanically an incredibly well put together piece of kit, so I've got no actual real fears about that side of things. So well done, Arizona, basically. And I just thought, for full transparency, check back in with you. You can see there's some thin clouds passing through, but I have now changed. Just plate solve this, the rotation, 179.96, so it's perfectly squared off. And if I just look at the aberration inspector, it's perfect. Take a look at that. Now then, guys, we're a few days on. I've got a few miles under my belt with this HyperStar system, and I'm really enjoying myself. But I think it's as good a time as any to jump into some evaluation now of what I've actually captured and talk to you about the system as a whole, what it's been like to use. So hopefully you saw earlier on that the collimation and kind of that side of things was just very easy. With those thumb adjusters, it's not a hard task. It is a task, so you can't call it a truly, you know, just a bolt-on, grab-and-go, immediate solution. There is going to be a little bit of adjustment if you want to get the best out of this thing. But it only took 10 minutes, and once it's done, I think it's done. It seems to be holding and working perfectly at various different pointing angles in the sky. So no reportable problems whatsoever there, even when used with a reasonably heavy cooled camera. So that's a +1. In terms of build quality, wonderful. I'm very happy with it, and the ergonomics of use, making those adjustments, very easy. So, you know, top marks there. It's as easy as a system like this could ever hope to be. It is a specialized bit of kit. Now, in terms of illumination, I think this is a good target to show you on. So NGC 1333, but I'm going to just look at now. You see I've got a bunch of lights. If I just pick one of these lights, whatever it be, you know, whatever this one, open up the histogram tool, you can see minimum values about 9K, 8.9K-ish. These I've double checked this in Nina. These are in the absolute corners. It is evenly illuminated. It is, for me, it works very well. And about those 13,000 average values, they are about the center. So there is a notable drop off from about 13,000 ADU to about 9K in the corners of an APS-C size sensor, but it's more than manageable with flats. In fact, you know, if you wanted to, you could probably just get rid of it with background extraction. I haven't tried just doing it with DBE or, you know, Graxpert, probably more accurately, it would be safe to say is what you'd use. I haven't tried, but I'm sure it could get rid of this kind of drop-off. It's not that much. But overall, field quality, I mean, stars in the center of the field of view look bloody darn good to me. Over in the far left, far right, if we check top mid, bottom mid, and now we'll go around the corners too. So bottom left, we are viewing 100% view right here. So bottom left, top left, top right, and bottom right. And I think the top right actually brings me neatly onto another point, as this corner exhibits it the most of all. I've still got a little bit of uncorrected tilt on my sensor. It's not been enough to bother with. But if I zoom right in now, like 300%, these bright stars are going to show you what I'm talking about. So there's a small amount inherent, I think, to the HyperStar of radial chromatic aberration. So you can see on a bright star here, a very slight red fringe towards the outer edge and a very slight blue fringe towards the inner edge, indicating very slightly different focal points that far away from the center of field for red and blue. So, you know, radial chromatic aberration, at least that's what I'm reading it as. It's certainly not present in the middle or anything like that, so it's a phenomenon that goes equally out from center.
It's not something that bothers me, but I realise this is an expensive piece of glass, and I think anybody who might be looking at making a purchase off the strength of a review like this, because I realise I'm gushing over it. I really like it, but I want to give you the full fact as I am able and let you know everything about it just to make sure that you would be happy. I certainly am. And if you can take a look on some stacked data here, so you can see, I think the effect is minimized really when the data is stacked, especially, so this is on my own data right here. It looked worse on individual frames. On my friend Bill's data, if we just have a look here too, it's the same sort of thing, so it seems to be inherent to the HyperStar rather than anything else. And I wanted to point out as well that you get this too with the RASA. My RASA 11 definitely exhibited this same thing. The advantage really of the RASA over this was better field illumination. So whereas this dropped off, I don't know, 35% or so in the corners of an APS-C size sensor, the RASA 11 was probably about 90% still in the corners. Whether that matters to you or not is up to you. It's not for me to say, but it doesn't bother me whatsoever, especially over the size of sensor that I wanted to use. Now, if you take a look at some M42 data, this is this looks good when it's edited, I will say, but this is in its unedited state, just STF applied, so a one-to-one view, far left, you know, top left, bottom left. I'm skipping around because there's not much to show, to be honest. There's a little bit of that radial CA visible on these corners. Again, like I say, it is there, but it's not much. And once given some processing, so this is just 20 minutes, by the way, of data. I did this as an interim test. This is 20 minutes of data, 2-to-1 right now. So if we zoom in, take a look around, see those star quality is fantastic after some processing is applied, which you're going to apply anyway. If you're anything like me, this has been done with BXD at defaults. Nothing special. It gets rid of any and all small aberrations like that, but this is the 2 hours of data given some more processing now. M42, and I think it's my best capture of M42 I've ever done. And I did it quite by accident, basically just something to image at the end of a session. And blimey, the amount of background dust and things that you can pull out with a hyper-fast system such as this is wild. Now, obviously, you'll read in some of the marketing stuff, you know, like 25 times shorter exposures, and that might be accurate in terms of just shortness of exposure, but it's not 25 times better signal to noise ratio, at least as far as I get it. But it is undeniably just light years faster than F10 feels like for the same sort of thing. You wouldn't be hoping to go after the very, very faint stuff with an F10 system, generally speaking, unless you had pristine skies maybe. But I don't. But this opens up more of the sky than ever before to me as a result of that speed. You know what I mean? At f1.9 is even faster than my RASA 11 was at f2.2, and it's a little bit more than it feels too. It's I think around about 35-40% faster, something like that, if you used an equivalent exposure calculator. So it's a major leap. And the only trade down for me is that I am using APS-C now rather than the ability to use full frame on it. Not something that bothers me, but it may bother you, and I want to make you aware of that too. But I think the long and short of this, the best way to probably wrap up is just by saying I personally went into this whole thing thinking that a bolt-on aftermarket solution, such as a HyperStar, I always thought that it would never be as good, if you like, as a built-from-the-ground-up kind of solution, such as the RASA, but this has given me less issues than my RASA 11 did. And the stars, at least over the APS-C size that I've been able to test on this, are every bit as good. The field coverage, just very slightly less in terms of illumination, but I'm completely happy. You know, I think I'm a fairly discerning user, and I'm pretty picky to be fair as well. I'm very happy with it. Very, very, very happy with it. And if I'd paid full price, I'd still be very, very happy with it. It's just lucky for me I managed to pick one up used in great condition. This has given me what I want for a very minimal outlay in terms of astronomy terms anyway. It's still expensive, of course, but what it gives is a heck of a lot of value for the money. Anyway, I've waffled on at extreme length, I realise now, so I am going to leave it at that. I hope that you've enjoyed watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed spending some time with me and seeing what's what. So look after yourselves. Thank you so much for your support, guys. It really does mean the world to me and my family, and I can't thank you enough. But I'll try anyway. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you. Look after yourselves. I'll see you in a future video. Until then, though, clear skies.